I'm going to do something in this video I don't do very often. I've only made 10,000 videos. I'm going to cough. I'm getting over 3/4 of a cold, and I can't hold it in even though I've got some candies in my office. I have just spent the last 2 hours at least crawling underneath this Mercedes. I enjoy watching Kent and diesel Mercedes in California and Kent and Bellingham. Taking off the drive shaft. You think it's easy? It is not an easy job. And I tried every tool in my toolbox. The bolts that hold this on are a real problem. They come in from on top, and this is a 4MATIC all-wheel drive. I think they all are. Yes, all the MLs are 4-wheel drive like the Subarus, except for the sporty Toyota model. Yeah, that's right. Toyota makes a Subaru, or Subaru makes a Toyota, just like Chevy made the Geo in Numi. But that's another story. You put the 16 millimeter or 5/8 socket on the top of this, and you've got limited swing, and all the bolts are covered in a generous application of anti-seize. No, seize compound, pardon me. And where are they? Oh man, those are the bolts. That's a 6 millimeter Allen head that is held on to the back of the transfer case. And there's the bolts that go through the flange at the back of the drive shaft into the pinion. And I think I took the bolts and I put them, over here on this tire. That's right. And these are the bolts that go through the cross member, and you can look through a tiny peephole and see how long that bolt is, and it's 3 times as long as it needs to be. And they've got anti-seize on it. So maybe I should have heated it up with a torch and melted the anti-seize, but I was worried with all the fluid film that something could catch fire and I'd regret it. So I struggled for an hour, swinging my ratchet, using my thumb to push it, because you can't put your hand around it because the transfer case is there, the exhaust system is there, the heat shields are there. What a struggle. I even tried a 1/4 inch ratchet that I've got with an adapter to go from 1/4 inch to 3/8. It's got a nice soft rubber handle that wouldn't be as hard on your thumb when you're pressing against it. And I tried everything, but this thing is too flexible. It was flexing most of my swing availability, so that didn't work. And you can't use one of these with a ratcheting top because it's not long enough. What a struggle. That anti-seize, let me tell you, or the locking compound, pardon me. I'm really frustrated. It's chilly. It's supposed to be spring, and it is cold. It's probably 35 degrees, and I'm working in the shop with the door wide open. The sun already has gone down. And luckily, the good news is the bearing is bad. So you take off the bolts that hold the center support, which goes here. Let's put this back together. Let's mock this up. Oh man, I'm struggling. Getting too old for this game. The center support goes, well, here's the old one, and it's bad. It goes through there, and you've got a hammer on it to get it off. And then you've got this thing over here, and it's got a big nut. That's, what size is that nut? I watched Joe's snowmobiles, and he said it was a difficult job, and he's right. It is a 15/16 nut, and you need an impact gun to get it off because it just hammers it off. I've got a few of these toys. And then, strangely enough, you hammer on this thing to get it off of the short shaft. This goes into the back of the transfer case. That's your front shaft. There's a joint over here. Overly complicated. And you just hammer on that, and it eventually comes off. It's not the tightest fit because you're basically hammering on rubber. You don't need a puller. You've got to take this thing off first, so I'm really tired of this. Let's see. I'm kind of jumping back and forth here. That was on there. And I watched a couple guys taking these apart, and one guy used a chisel to hammer on the, what would you call this, the yoke. And he hammered on it, and I hammered on it 20 times, and it slid off, and it's got what looks like old dried grease. It looks like anti-seize or rust, but it looks like a combination of old grease and rust. So that comes off, then you hammer on the rubber, and this thing comes off in a few minutes. Not the hardest thing to remove. And You stick your finger in it and you rotate. And I've felt worse bearings in my life, but this one's bad enough. And it was definitely at the end of its useful life, 144,000 miles. We just actually went for a road trip yesterday, 180 miles, and we got 18 miles per gallon. And I had Miss Hip Chick keeping it under 60 miles an hour because I was really worried about this thing. It had been howling when I went to Vermont 2 weeks ago. Woo! It didn't do it this trip, but I've heard it a couple of times. She drives the car mostly to work, 10, 15 miles this way, that way. Not the farthest drive. But it's definitely bad. So I guess if they last 130 to 150,000 miles, I got my money's worth out of it. Just too bad it's one part after the other. Somebody made a comment in one of my videos. Just leave one thing broken, that way the car will be happy. So what I had originally ordered was, through Amazon, a genuine Mercedes center support bearing. And here, I'll show you my face. So I ordered this genuine Mercedes center support bearing. Listen to this. It comes in the mail. The UPS guy delivers it. And in the box, it's gone now, I've returned it, was a Fabi Bilstein box with a Made in Germany logo on the rubber, but you can't tell what's on the bearing. It doesn't say unless you take it apart, destroy this thing. But I didn't want to take a chance because the box also had a sticker that said Made in China. Now, who'd put a Made in China sticker on a Fabi Bilstein part? And the rubber did say Made in Germany, but I paid 80 bucks for it, 70 or 80 bucks. I sent it back because I could buy a Euro one, URO, with a NSK Japanese bearing for $35. And I don't know why they sell it with this stupid support plate. Just a big waste. Anyhow, so I went to the Mercedes forum. I think it's Ben's World that I go to, I don't recall, or MB World. And a guy said, well, get the genuine Spicer because this is a Spicer Dshaft having been made in Alabama, the first Mercedes made in the States. And what guy said it's 180 bucks, but it's worth it because he put a Meyle, M-E-Y-L-E, Meyle, and it lasted 3,500 miles. Well, we don't want that. It's way too big of a job, and it's too important to blow up. So some other guy wrote, buy it on Amazon, and I didn't see it on Amazon, but I went back to Amazon, and I returned that Fabi Bilstein Germany China bearing, got my money back with shipping included. Didn't have to pay a penny, just the aggravation, the waste of time. And I bought this genuine Spicer, which says United States on it. Now everything says made with globally sourced parts, blah, 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 blah. Domestic and foreign imported parts, who the hell knows anymore. The rubber could come from one country and the bracket from somewhere else, could come from Canada, Mexico, Thailand, Korea, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Turkey. I've seen stuff from Israel, everywhere. And you don't know what's good or bad. So anyways, I got the genuine Spicer. I paid the 60 or 70 bucks or 80 bucks for it. I'm going to put it on right now. I was at a starter and alternator rebuilding shop yesterday, the biggest one in Canada, eh? And the guy was telling me that it's easier to buy, where did I put that box? He says it's easier to buy cores from China. They're so-called brand new. And he takes them apart and rebuilds them. He had calipers for a high-note truck and calipers for Ford F-550 dump trucks and the like. And he buys these brand new calipers, takes them apart. He even buys Corvette ones, 65 to 81. And he takes them apart, the made in China cores, and he sleeves every one, he says, because their machining isn't that great. And he sleeves every one of the 4-piston bores on the Corvette calipers. They use the same ones on GM cars, mid-size and full-size in 67 and 68 till they went to the floating in 69. But the Corvette kept the 4-piston. Anyways, he opened up this alternator that I took off the Mercedes in San Antonio, Texas when I got the trailer hitch for this Mercedes. And he put a bearing in it. He opened up the starter that I got, spare parts, and he cleaned it and whatever. And then I brought him this V12 BMW starter, and I wish I would have made a video, but my battery didn't charge overnight at the Airbnb. My fault, I didn't have it plugged in. It was a bad plug, and the phone's worn. So he opened up this starter that I bought for the V12 BMW. I was on eBay just poking around, and I found this one for an 88. It fits 88 to 91, I think. 750 IL or the 850, the two-door. And I bought this thing for $33, including delivery, which is probably 15 bucks. But anyways, if they've got it on the shelf and it's sitting there, it's worth nothing. So this starter looks beautiful. It came from Georgia, pretty much a rust-free part of the country. It rains, but they don't get any snow or salt. So this thing looks beautiful, right? Nice and shiny and clean, and it wasn't cleaned or touched up, just Looks like a beautiful starter. I didn't test it. I just brought it to the shop, and this guy was leaving for the day. He said, okay, I'll just do one last starter for you. He opens the thing up, and it is a disaster. The piston in here for the solenoid was seized. Not seized, but stuck from rust. There was rust in the bottom of the case. This thing looked nasty inside. Anyways, he opened it up. He showed me all the little gear parts. There's gears that spin in here somewhere, and I wish I would have made a video of it. But he was done in 20 minutes. Had it apart, cleaned, greased, put it back together. Everything was fine. Bushings weren't worn. But you never can tell. The nicest part on the shelf may be the biggest dud. I learned that way back in 1979 when a friend of mine bought a 409 and I took apart the starter and I ruined it. So I went to the junkyard to get one. And the guy says, take the greasiest one. I said, no, I'll take the prettiest one. And I did, and it didn't work, of course. So that's when I learned how to rebuild starters for GMs. I wouldn't take this one apart. Too many parts for me, for my feeble brain. It's got a gear set inside, a ring. Looks like a inside ring and pinion. An inside ring, a starter ring gear, rather. And it's got little blocks that absorb the... Anyways, it was a bit noisy when he put it back together. So what I'm going to do is buy another one. And I'm also going to take the one off the V12 when I get to it. Some guy was saying on YouTube that if you take off the solenoid, you can remove the starter from the V12 without having to drop the exhaust. Otherwise, you're going to drop the exhaust. So, I don't know. Take out these little Phillips screws. Where are they? There's 3 of them. Take out those little Phillips screws when the solenoid's on the car. I don't know. Give it a try. If the exhaust has to come down, so be it. This has also got a double bracket that bolts to the block so the starter shouldn't twist. And it bolts on in 2 places, unlike the GM 6.2, 6.5, it just has 1 bracket that goes up to the block. It really should be a double bracket, much heavier. GM undersized it, and they undersized the bolts that go into the block. There's not enough meat there. The bolts are too small. So anyways, that's the whole story. So I've got spare alternator and starter for the ML, and some rusty Corvair ones. Those are easy to rebuild. And I've got to take the starter, rather the alternator, off that Mercedes because it's not charging. And some guy wrote, Legit Streetcars wrote that you can take off the brush regulator assembly with the alternator on the vehicle in his AMG, but not on this baby. On this one, and you can't see it now because it's buried, but on this one they've got an engine mount immediately behind the alternator. So there's no way. Oh, come on. Come on, baby. There's no way to get to the back of this as an engine mount. Big bracket right behind it. So my buddy Nick's going to get me some parts for this thing. He already got me a couple of spare alternators, and I'll pull that one. And I got all kinds of Mercedes stories going on. Why am I playing with Mercedes? I don't know. This one's rusty. I don't like it. The bleeder was busted off on the other side. I tried to remove it. I heated it up, but I was getting way too close to these rubber lines for the anti-lock brakes and crap, so I just left it. I don't know why it was broken off. If I have to, I'll put a used caliper on. S10 junk. Everything is junk. Did I show you my Suburban? I don't know if I made a video of this. Check this out. Rusted. I had the windshield guy come here the other day, and he pulled the windshield because it was cracked and I can't pass my yearly inspection. So he pulls the windshield. I noticed a tiny bit of rust here, just a tiny bit. And when I bought it, there was a bit of rust here at the bottom. That pisser fixed reasonably well without pulling the windshield. Anyways, the guy pulls the windshield, and the entire bottom is rotted from water sitting underneath the rubber gasket. And the gasket, amazingly, for 34 years old, was like brand new. Anyways, I cleaned out the rust from the gasket, and I sandblasted this. I got sand all inside the vehicle, even though I had it covered with some plywood and a couple of rags, and at one point I lost control and I sandblasted my nice paint job. So I've got this guy who said he'd come by and paint some damage to this vehicle. Look at that rust hole. That really hurts. My beautiful rust-free truck. Next time I'll follow sweet Project Cars advice and put some fluid film or mineral oil down around the channel. I've painted it with epoxy paint for now. So the temperature is chilly, and I haven't coughed. Amazingly, I apologized before I coughed, and I didn't even cough. I'm going to put this thing back together and be back at work tomorrow. Today is Sunday. Happy Easter, happy Passover, and remember, I love matzah.